the Sunday Telegraph, and Grazia, among others. Of course, tonight's book, in her defense, is already making rounds on the must-read circuits. It's getting a seal of approval from none other than, obviously, Reese Witherspoon, as well as nominated for the Bridgeport Prize in Debut Fiction. Publishers Weekly called her book a bewitching debut, while Kirkus Reviews said readers will be on tenterhooks, waiting for the outcome of the trial. I was immediately impressed right after I looked up what the heck tenterhook meant. Tenterhooks are those hooks that hang, like kind of like vertical hooks that hang in there. Yeah. But it also means it's being in a state of painfully anxious suspense, tension, or nervous anticipation. So please welcome first Philippa. Joining her in conversation, María Amparo Escandón. She's a New York Times best-selling bilingual author in both Spanish and English, whose previous books include the #1 LA Times bestseller, Esperanza's Box of Saints, and Gonzalez and Daughter Trucking Company. Her third novel, which we've sold very well here, LA Weather, was also a Reese Book Club pick, and it was featured on Oprah Quarterly. She was born in Mexico City, but has lived in Los Angeles for nearly 4 decades. She's a retired advertising executive to write full-time, and we're so glad she did it. So please welcome María.
Well, I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite, some time. Well, first of all, I just wanted to tell you a little bit because about the run-up show. We have 45 minutes, right?
You're about 40 years, yeah.
40 minutes or so, and then we can do a Q&A before we do the book signing. Okay. My book is not sadly available at the store, but you can find it online for sure.
We'll order it for you, definitely.
Or you can order it here. Okay, so ¿me prestas mi celular, por favor? Gracias. So I have my cheat sheet here.
Mine's in my head somewhere, I think.
Oh my gosh. Well, it was a very crazy few days that I spent reading your book. It's really never happened before that the characters were heroes and villains, the same character, went from, I'm rooting for this character, and then all of a sudden going, oh my God, that's bad, and, it was so weird. It was so bizarre and wonderful because you really had me, I thought I was being manipulated, and I was liking it.
We put that on the cover of the paperback. Yeah.
You'll be manipulated, and you'll
enjoy it. Yeah, you'll enjoy the feeling. Oh.
Yeah. So, I just have a few questions. I know you can have long answers, and and maybe talk a little bit more about things that I may not cover. But the first one that I'd like to you to tell us, and we're gonna be careful not to give you guys spoilers if you haven't read the book, so we're gonna try to kind of work around the plot, but this whole destabilizing the reader, keeping the reader like should I go this way, should I go that way, with the characters and the plot and where it's heading, I must say there are should we talk about the characters? We really have 4 women that are super complex.
I could do a tiny summary really, but we've got 4 main women that the narrative kind of circles around. You have Anna Fimbo, who is this matriarch, kind of, I call her the woman of the Sunday supplements. You know, she's sort of, I think in American parlance, a kind of Martha Stewart figure, but at the same time she's had a kind of rock and roll bohemian kind of background, and she's this kind of homewares magnate now. You then have her daughter Mary, who has publicly estranged herself from her mother and her father, but really very clearly against her mother. You have a woman called Gus, who is at the beginning she's Anna's assistant. She knows a lot about Anna. She works for Anna's household as her dog walker. And then you have a character called Jean Guest. And Jean is, she calls herself a therapist. She sometimes calls herself a healer or a life coach. In the UK, anybody can set up shop and call themselves those professions or terms, which I think legally is a difference between the US, although I do hear many sort of similar stories coming out of the US. So you have the mother, you have the therapist who her daughter Mary is working with, you have Mary who's cut herself off on the advice of her therapist, and then you have the narrator Gus, who guides you throughout the story, and who definitely isn't who she appears to be. No spoilers.
Very nice, nicely put.
I met a Hollywood producer once, and he said, "There's a lot of estrogen in this book," and I was like, yeah.
We like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, it's a plus.
Yeah, exactly.
You say it like it's a bad thing.
Exactly. I didn't know there was any other world.
Yeah. So, talk to us a little bit about that. You know, like memory, what I call self-mythology, and how you play with the truth. So, who holds the truth? You know, in the story, and it has to do with the way you destabilize the reader, because sometimes you think that the truth is in one of the characters, and then maybe not, you know, and so you bounce around. You have us bouncing around from character
There's
to
lots
character.
of competing narratives. I think the interesting kind of, I guess the kind of kernel of the story was the idea of talking therapy in itself. So the idea that you go into a room, you trust whoever you're talking to, you give them a narrative of your life, and they give you a narrative as far as they believe your life is too, and together you try and heal or, you know, square what's kind of gone on, and you create a narrative in language. And that whole process to me seems very vulnerable. I think it can be very healing, and I've personally had, you know, successful therapy, but I think the whole world of that feels quite fascinating to me, that I could, you know, meet a practitioner and tell them something about my life, and they would then give their own version of it and say, well, actually, you know, have you examined X, Y, and Z? Anyway, it was this was the kind of interesting story. What would happen if that practitioner had bad motivations? Or, you know, you're meeting someone at a very vulnerable point in their life. So this whole world of talking therapy to me, and, you know, the way that you can kind of bring up something that maybe happened to you as a child, and that somebody else could then ask you a question about that memory, and then you remember it slightly differently every time you say it, which I think they say is true for all memory. It gets rebuilt every time you recall something. So that whole sort of vulnerable world was very interesting to me. So that was the kind of theme. And then I think where it starts to all feel even more like you don't know where you sit is because for the book, unlike yours, I chose first person narration all the way through with one narrator, and that means that means that you are only ever in her hands. And even if she's not the most straightforward character, even if she were to be the most straightforward character, she'd still be telling you lies, she'd be misremembering things, you know, it would still be an unreliable form, if you like. So I guess you have the double layer. You have people engaged in talking therapy with a really, really dangerous practitioner, and then all of that world is being recounted by somebody solely through her perspective, and you don't really trust what she's saying. And I think I'm really interested in that mode of narration. They talk about an unreliable narrator, But I think all narrators are unreliable on some level because they're only showing you one thing and their perspective, and as a result, the whole experience can feel very claustrophobic, which I think is potentially what makes the book a bit stressful to read at times. I think.
Well, it's obviously fascinating because it really demands your full attention, and you're there. But what really impressed me was the fact that I was changing alliances here and there sometimes, and that is because Gus, who is the narrator, is, she herself is very vulnerable and has a lot of, problems, just trying to belong and all these things, that make her point of view and the way she perceives the whole thing quite biased.
Yes.
Right? And then there is the other thing, which is the she's involved with both sides of the the accuser and the accused.
Yeah.
And so that alone creates a whole other perspective of the novel that I think is also fantastic and fascinating. Can you tell us about how you came up with that kind of structure where you have, and I think it was very, very well done. There's what's going on at the court.
Yeah.
Right, and then there's the story behind and how we got here, right?
The backstory.
Yeah, and she goes back and forth. So good.
Thank you. It took me so long, I'm afraid to say. It took me a long, long time to come up with that structure. I actually wrote the story of the therapist recruiting people in Rome, and then I sent it to my agent, and we were discussing it on the phone, and I said, I just have this image, and it wasn't in the book yet. I have this image of one of the girls standing up in court against her mother. Just got this image of it, and she's kind of testifying against her mother and saying, you were a bad mother and I prefer, my life with the therapist. And my agent was like, well, that's not in the book. So you've got to write it. And I was like, okay. I then really grappled with how to get this trial structure into the novel. And it was tricky because what the therapist in my book does is not illegal. It's not illegal. The girls are all over 18. They have their own independent income. It's not illegal to, as we said, set up shop and and have sessions with people. So it couldn't be a criminal trial. And around that time, it was the trial of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, which in the UK was a big defamation libel case. I think it was slightly different over here, but I was really interested in this defamation and libel as a kind of arena through which you can debate the truth of something. So in the book, the mother, the woman of the Sunday supplements that I described, she writes a kind of Gwyneth Paltrow Goop-style newsletter linking to a petition against the therapist. And the therapist says, you've defamed me. And Anna says, I haven't defamed you because what I said was true. And that enables you to debate the matter in court. So I kind of got to grips with libel law. It was like, oh my God. Wrote the trial, and it was at the end of the book. And at the, it felt too much once you read the story to then have a trial. It felt too much like it had been squidged on the end. And I knew that. It was okay, but I just wasn't quite happy with it. And I knew what I really needed to do was to thread it through the entire spine of the novel. And that took me about 8 or 9 months. I had to just, get the scalpel out, as they say, and perform some serious surgery. And I'm so glad I did because it makes the book more suspenseful, I think. You don't feel you have these two timelines, and I think it works much better than it did. So a lot of reading about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard online, which is actually really fun research. Like really, really, what a crazy trial to read. I had to make sure I didn't use too much American terminology in the various court documents that I read, and then worked out my own version of it. I was talking about writing trials in a different event, and they're actually not too hard for the author because more or less we all know what a courtroom looks like. You know, whereas when I was, you know, writing a party scene or some of the big, you know, scenes that you write, you have to work really hard to get the reader to know where they are. Whereas a courtroom, you can do it quite lightly and you can get into dialogue quite quickly. So although technically, you know, I was quite nervous about getting the details right, and spoiler, I didn't, but they, you know, actually the kind of description of the courtroom, I was able to get into that writing quite quickly. So I just said, you know, wooden panelled room, judge in a wig, cameras outside, and then I felt like the reader could get there. So that was quite a good lesson, I guess.
Yeah, I think the sense of place is fantastic, and I would love for you to tell us about Rome. Were you there? Have you been? Did you take classes there? Are you a ceramicist?
No.
What is your? I mean, it's so romantic and so sexy.
Yeah.
The whole thing with the art classes and everything. There's the whole part of the book happens there, and I was like, ooh, well, you know. So tell us about that.
Oh, okay. So I wanted. This is not a spoiler. The therapist picks up her victims in Italy, and even though the therapist is English, and even though the girls are English, I wanted them to be away from home. That made them vulnerable, and I think most of us here can remember what that feels like when you first live away from home and you're maybe 21 and 22. You think you're a grown up. Actually, you're kind of dealing with the adult world, and it's quite intimidating. And you're quite vulnerable to there being an older woman saying, you know, how are you? I had a dream about you. Is everything okay? And I've got a lovely apartment, and come round for dinner. Or, you know, it was really useful to have a kind of a location away from home. And somewhere like Italy, I mean, you know, I think Talented Mr. Ripley would have been a really big influence, is a big influence in this book. We all know that like mad things happen in Italy, whether you're American or English. Henry James, God, there's so many like literary precedents for Italy being a kind of corrupting, kind of sexy place. And it's not just because you're eating pizza and ice cream. I think there's something in the kind of artworks, being surrounded with the ancient and classical world, that can kind of, you know, mess with your head. And Gus, in my book, she's doing a ceramic course. I just looked at lots of stuff online. And Mary works, she's a student at portrait school, a much more kind of upper class portrait school. I lived in Rome for about 10 months many years ago, so I was able just to remember some of my favourite places from there, but I wasn't at art school at all. I was working for an English language newspaper that was like just a crazy job. I earned €50 a week, and I just was sort of running around on a bicycle, but yeah, it was really fun to remember those memories. And again, there'll be fallible memories. I'll remember only the romantic, sexy bits of Rome, and there were very many weird times there. But I always say that it's quite fun to set some of your books somewhere that you'd like to go and research, because you then have an excuse to go back and
Wink, wink, over there. Yes.
Where are you setting your? Where are you
Yeah, and now he's writing a book on France, and now we're going.
Oh, brilliant.
But anyway, I wanted to just to you know, sort of tell you my experience in the whole part of Rome. It felt like you said, you know, it just took me to my years when I was, you know, young, and everything felt sort of sexy and dangerous. Like it was like in that line between, you know, like you're thinking something's gonna happen here, you know, because it just, the way the girls were dealing with others, this guy who's a smaller character, but it's important. His name is Lawrence, who is a teacher at the school, and you, the moment I met Lawrence on the page, I'm like, oh, this guy, you know. But this is me in my 60s. If I were in my 20s, how would I view this guy? You know, oh wow, you know, he's a, you know, almost like a larger than life character, which, you know, turned out people turn out to be a bit dangerous as well. And so you handle it really well, because you were able to really, the girls are in their like early 20s or 18 to 21 or something, and it really made me feel when I was that age, it was very, very well portrayed.
I think that I'm really interested in that vulnerable the early 5 years maybe of your 20s, where you are kind of expected to be a grown-up, but you're so not there, and you're really trying to navigate a grown-up world. And I've been thinking more about like Ghislaine Maxwell, particularly as I've been promoting the book. Similarly, that kind of woman who turns up and pretends to be your friend. And I spent many months writing scenes where the therapist was coming and preying on these girls, and they never felt right. I had her bumping into them in bars, and they didn't work. And in the end I realized that the way that she is able to recruit and seduce is just by having a nice apartment and inviting the girls round. And actually, when you're that young, you're that impressionable, I would be as impressed by somebody's bookshelf or their wardrobe, or if they were a good cook, or if they said they knew someone cool. And so in the end, there's a beginning of a chapter where the narrator Gus is reflecting of how did I let this woman become the architect of my life. And I can't remember quite what I say, but it's like, because her apartment was nice and because she cared about me. And I just think that sometimes the simplest ways in are the ways that people manage to like make inroads into your life. I still get goosebumps when I think about that, because it's so scary. And yeah, Jean is, she's a kind of mother figure, but she's also a little bit aloof, and she's kind of cool, and she wears cool clothes. At the beginning anyway, she wears fabulously structural clothes and has a nice bicycle, and she has this beautiful apartment. And it turns out it's an Airbnb. Sorry, I've just spoiled it. But
I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Sorry. But it's so interesting how, as you get older, you realize those things that you seem so shiny and so grown up and so exciting are actually, they're just grown ups dealing with their own, in Jean's case, dangerous neuroses.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're so impressionable at that age,
Yeah.
Yeah. I picked my first husband because he played in a band.
Exactly.
That was the criteria,
Exactly, and wasn't that probably because you were looking for that to be reflected in
Yeah.
your
He plays in a
they're
band and
cool.
has long hair. Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, exactly, and I think that certainly for Gus, Jean is the mother that she kind of craved, sophisticated and caring, whereas Gus's mother wasn't like that at all.
Yes.
But I think the art school setting as well, it's really helpful to imagine girls that are creative, desperate to try and get their own story out onto the paper, but the school that they're at is asking them to do portraits, very classical portraits, paint by numbers, and so they're like, it would be like being at creative writing school and you're only allowed to write gothic romance again and again and again and again. You'd go mad, and you probably, you would be attracted to other stories or other narratives. And so that mode of portraiture became a really useful way in which the girls were able to be vulnerable as well.
Yes, very vulnerable. Tell us a little bit about Anna. Now you're a mom, so let's talk about motherhood and what Anna really wants, of course, is to recover her daughter. But tell us a little bit about her, because she also is a little bit, ambiguous.
Yeah, I initially wrote Anna much more straightforwardly. She was the mother with an estranged daughter. We felt sorry for her. She was a victim. You felt, really bad for her situation. And then later on, it became clear, and I had some advice from a writing mentor. It said, make it ambiguous whether the girl is better off with the therapist or with the mother. So the mother, that started to make me make Anna a bit more of a narcissistic, more of a complicated woman. And she is, she's so self-obsessed. She thinks the therapist is going after her daughter because of who she is. She says, this has always been about me. And I still feel very strongly and very sympathetically to her situation, and I did before I was a mother, and I do now. But there's no doubt that I had so much fun writing her self-centeredness and writing that. I was interested in that level of fame, you know, what do you do growing up in that aura? It's a bit like Brooklyn Beckham, which has been a huge story for us over in the UK, you know, when you're part of these huge family dynasties and actually you're living in the shadow of a very, very, magnetic, charismatic woman, and you're trying to make your way. And actually, you know, the appeal of someone like Jean would be very strong when you know, who says, you know, you've got to step out of her shadow and she's holding you back and your mother's always been toxic, you know. So I really feel for Mary, the daughter, because I think growing up as Anna's daughter would have been horrible, really. You know, Anna has no boundaries. She's totally gorgeous but so intense with her daughter, and she sends her off to, you know, rehabs and doesn't want to deal with the situation and puts her own fame and her own story first. And you start to feel, you know, the fact that Anna takes the therapist to court, you think, is this about your own, you know, this is about your own reputation rather than your daughter. And that's something, you know, if your daughter went missing, you probably wouldn't go through the courts so publicly to get her back. You know, that's very much Anna's, you know, MI, or whatever you say, MO.
Yes, again, a super complex character with all these layers, you know, just like all the other women in your book. Is there another topic that you'd like to share with us that you think is relevant for you, that you would like us to take with us when we go read your book?
Thank you for that question. I think it's really exactly what you pulled out, which is that no character is that straightforward, and as much as we like to think that we're all good, or, you know, everybody has a kind of darker side. And, you know, the ending of the book, I'm not going to spoil it, but there aren't any huge big Hollywood moments of growth. The growth kind of happens, there are sort of hints towards growth and change rather than these kind of great big moments of, you know, revelation. And I think sometimes that feels a bit frustrating for readers, but at the same time I felt very true to me in terms of what the characters go through. So I think just, you know, hoping that as frustrating as they are, those characters are fully rounded on the page as much as they can be. And I think also just be careful of therapists out there. Be careful of life coaches and therapists would be my piece of advice with the book.
Careful with the quacks.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I've heard so many people's stories coming through after writing this book. They said, oh, this happened to me, or this happened to my friend, or so, you know, have your guard on, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, you have to be careful.
Yeah.
You have, my cousin and her husband went to a couple therapy because he was having affairs, and, you know, he was a womanizer. He ended up with the therapist.
There we are.
Oh,
There we
my
are.
God.
And this is in America, so yeah, it's incredible. I assume it's America, was it, or was it Mexico?
No, that was in Mexico.
Oh, that was Mexico. Okay.
Which, by the way, sounds very much like in England. You
Where
know?
anybody can.
Oh yes, the healers and the, you know, they mix
Yeah. It's all just
ancient
well,
ancient practices.
it's the quest for belonging, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I, you know, that's what all of the characters are looking for in this book, really. And I think what we look for as readers in a story as well. So,
Yes.
yeah.
But the ending, just to, you know, kind of tell you my bit on the ending, I think a Hollywood ending would not go well with this book, because the book is so complex and has so many layers and is so ambivalent and ambiguous all the time, and the characters are so well defined and structured. It's not. It has to have the ending that it has.
Exactly.
You know,
How do you find writing endings? Do you find them hard? Because I found them so hard.
endings are hard,
Yeah.
very hard.
Yeah.
But yours works. Yours really works.
I
Yeah.
think I still, if I could, I'd still be writing a book and trying to work out these endings. I find them really, really difficult.
Yeah. Well, how about we talk a little bit about the craft?
Yeah.
Because, you know, I don't know, readers, writers, you know, we're always interested in, you know, and from everything, from do you have your favorite slippers to your you know, how you go about, presenting your novel
Well,
to
I
your...
want to ask you because you wrote your first two novels as screenplays first to get the
Yes.
ear for the dialogue, which
Yes.
I think is so interesting. So I'm going to put that question back at you. I wear earplugs
Okay.
and that's it. So I can kind of
Okay.
imagine what the characters are saying.
Okay.
But I mean, maybe you don't even need earplugs. You've just got a gift for it because to write a screenplay first and then go into novel.
Well, I did it out of necessity because my native language is Spanish, and I was having my first novel having a really hard time with dialogue. It sounded so stilted and so I said, well, I need to practice dialogue, and I thought, oh, okay, the best place to practice dialogue is in a screenplay. So I bought the software, practiced, wrote the whole story, did a screenplay of the novel, and then I just literally cut and paste in the Word document, and I had all the dialogue already, and then all the narration, all the action descriptions and all of that, I just turned them into narration and just reworked it. But I already had a skeleton of the novel, with the screenplay.
But you didn't do that with LA Weather.
No, I just did that in the first book because I had to practice, and the second book because I really saw a movie when I was writing it, and so I said, I'm gonna write the script, and
that's amazing.
And then
that really is amazing.
But LA Weather, I just went straight because I felt more confident with my English, and so I went straight to write the novel, and so
that's so amazing that you could just switch forms like that. That's seriously impressive.
Yeah, it's actually a lot of fun because you get to rewrite a lot, and it's because they're different media, really, so it really.
But you probably also, as you were creating scenes for your screenplay, you were able to, in very, very precise and succinct language, set the scene, like the courtroom.
Yes.
Paneled wooden room, man in a wig.
There you go.
It's amazing. I've tried writing screenplays and I just write long, dense prose of exposition, and then I get to a bit of dialogue. I think I'm probably not a screenwriter in any way, but in terms of a kind of routine or anything, it's really just that I have to wear wax earplugs to kind of block out any noise.
No noise.
And then I work wherever. Sometimes I work in bed, which is really bad.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can get out of it. It's so comfortable. Sometimes I go to the library. It depends what you're doing. If you're doing a brand new page of writing, which is always quite scary, then I need to be really quite sort of, everything shut out and be in that world. But if I'm editing, I could be in the library or somewhere a bit more public.
What kind of research did you do for this book? How do you do your research?
Well, Rome, I had a lot in my head. I did read a lot online about methods of portraiture and about ceramics. And lots of that never entered the book. So I had so many pages about that, and my editor was just like, we trust you. We trust that we trust your characters. You don't need to tell us that you know about ceramics. So you often, I don't know if you have this, but in your drafts, you're so pleased that you've sort of learned this whole mode of artistic practice that you need to persuade the reader. Whereas again, you can say, sitting at my wheel, hand stamped with clay, and then the reader hopefully kind of trusts you. But to get yourself there and to feel confident as a writer there, I had to do quite a lot of research just to feel like I knew what that was like.
Yeah, you kind of have to trust the reader that they're gonna fill in.
Yeah.
You say, she's at the potter's wheel. Oh, okay, they've seen it somewhere.
Exactly.
They kind of know, so. I think so, and we'll ask you guys when we open the room for Q&A.
That's the hardest job for the writer, to know when to step in and hold the hand really tightly, and then when to step back. And I think it's so annoying when you read a book where they're, describing things that you're already happy with. You're there, and so giving the reader the space to enter the text, enter the story with their own version of what Mary might look like, or whatever that is, and know that there's this amazing interconnected space, writer and reader, where the reader's creating their story too. It's so creative, and you have to let the reader in to do that, I think, and it's really hard to know when to step back. or
Yeah.
you just, hopefully the editors help you.
It's the most amazing process.
Yeah.
You know, you learn as you know, you may not have it the first time around, but you have to learn that, you know, you're not going to be there to, hey, you get it, you
See
know?
this word? Yeah, see this bit? Yeah.
You know, it's whatever's on the page, right? Yeah.
I really think that reading is as creative as being, you know, doing the writing as well. I think it's so radical and yeah, hopefully that there's enough space for the readers of this book to kind of come at it with their own story. I find that so thrilling.
Well, you're looking at, you know, totally, you know, words, letters, and you're turning them into visuals, a story, smells, textures, you know, conflicts, all kinds of things by reading letters.
Exactly. Your own memories.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Like, and then all this information is going through your own sieve, you know, of your own lived experience and how you see it.
It's wild to me.
Yeah.
And of course, every memory that you have, you'll be bringing to the page, and then you'll remember it differently, and you'll remember it differently. So it gets very deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, are you okay if we open the room for questions? Okay. Go for it. You already read the book. No spoilers.
No spoilers at all. I love the book so much.
Thank you.
And you are so eloquent with describing the disillusionment of a woman at this age. And I'm 28 myself, and just at that point of becoming disillusioned and I love your references, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, Ghislaine Maxwell, like so many things in our world are just becoming disillusioned, and the sadness of that. And I think my question is, especially for a writer, I'm a new writer myself.
Oh, cool.
And what's your process for writing a book and not being disillusioned by like how it's, but like once you release it, you know, and the magic of writing it and the magic of, you know, I'm such a dreamer, and I have my dreams are like so like make believe a little bit, but in a great way. So how do you keep yourself from, you know, once you release your book from like
I think your dreams sound good and apt and important and never too big, by the way. So I think you probably agree. You know, you have, when you release a story into a commercial marketplace, there's all of these other expectations that come on top of you, and I think you probably would say the same thing. You know, it's a really wild experience actually putting it out into a commercial market. In terms of whether how you don't sort of become disillusioned, I think going back to what we just discussed, writing is the greatest gift. If you feel the urge to do it, it's the greatest gift. It's such a low entry point to open a laptop and tap away. If you've got a story that you feel you want to answer, that's really how I kept going. I wanted to answer the question, how would it feel if your adult daughter cut off contact with you? How would that feel? And I'm still guided by that question. I'm still fascinated by that question. So I think, you know, you have to just understand that the commercial marketplace is a scary world, but in terms of the actual writing, how not to get disillusioned is to cling on to the questions that you can't quite answer. Like what, and that's what kept me turning up year after year on this story, because I couldn't quite understand the answer to them. And in my second book now, I'm thinking about similar questions of what would you do? It's about a sibling relationship. What would you do if you found out something very dark about your brother? And how would you reconcile that into your own life? And so if you can try and find an unanswerable question that keeps you turning up, that would be kind of my advice. And then I think you just have to listen to yourself. If you feel sad when you're not writing, which is how I feel, then I knew that was the path that I should probably be on. So just making time for yourself. What would you say though, Maria? How do you not get disillusioned in the world of writing and creativity?
Well, I try not to see past the page. You know, I'm not thinking about, oh, is my book going to be published? Oh, is my book going to be a bestseller? I don't think about that. I stay on the page. For me, writing is like driving at night, and the screen on my laptop is the headlights, what I see in front of me, and I just move along. I just move along and move along, and you know, there's a pothole, there's a detour, there's a rabbit, you know, just cross the road. You know, I know where I'm going more or less. I'm going from LA to New York. I kind of know where I'm going, but I'm not looking at maps. I'm not looking at, you know, when I get there, am I going to be received by a party of friends? No, I'm just going right now, staying on the page, and that keeps you really focused on your craft and not so much on your expectations, because your expectations, you're going to be disillusioned one way or another. I mean, for some odd reason, I have a best-selling book. Whenever I walk into a bookstore, I get disillusioned because I go, oh my
There's
God,
so much
the
good stuff.
competition,
Yeah.
you know? Look at all these books, you know? But all these books are success stories. And so, why not, you know? So don't think about it, you know? Just stay focused on, you know, just this little space between you and your story.
That's really good advice.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Who else would like to ask a question to Philly?
There was something you said, and we've talked about it as well, which is exploiting your fears. Because in real life, we'd rather not have them. But for a writer, they're absolutely essential.
They're
They're
essential.
your raw material.
Yes. There's an amazing quote by Eudora Welty, that she's an American writer, where she says that writers dare to do with their bag of fears, which goes to your, I probably really misquoted that, so you'll find some very bad version of that online, but turning up to the page, I feel frightened still with you know, what I'm trying to express and all of the different intimidating things about publishing, etc. So yeah, I mean, so your question is exploiting fears, but fears are very important, right? So yeah, tell me again, what rephrase your question again.
Well, when we've talked about her motivation to write something in particular, she talks about, she can express it better than I can, but she talks about diving into her worst fear.
Yeah.
And then saying, okay, what is it that, you know, her first novel has to do with losing a daughter.
Yeah.
So at that time, what could be worse than that?
Yeah.
And so you look for something, and you were talking a little bit about that.
I think it's probably something that many authors do, is that you write novels that answer or create a plan for the worst possible thing you can imagine. So often you find authors, you know, writing, oh, I don't know, Grief is the Thing with Feathers is the story that comes to mind. I think it's a prose poem by a British author. Anyway, he writes about the death of his wife and how he and his sons would get over it or not get over it and deal with their grief. And it's such a beautiful book. And he reflects on this. He says, I think I was a new dad and I just wrote my worst possible fear and played it out to the end to see what that might look like. She's alive and kicking, thank God, but now I've got a plan B and I know how something's going to go. And that's, you know, that's sort of very crudely put, but I think you're motivated by something that disturbs you on some level, and that's the kind of unreconcilable question that keeps you coming back to the page. It's very difficult though to set out and say, I'm scared of this, therefore I'm going to write my story about it. It's part of the strange act of writing. Things come to the surface that you didn't even know you were afraid of. So I think it's hard to kind of as I say, to kind of set out to do that kind of thing. But I do think, I mean, I don't know if you read things in your books where you think, oh wow, I was very anxious about that, evidently, and now I've worked it out, or now I've...
Absolutely. I tell I taught creative writing at UCLA for 25 years. And, and something I used to tell the students is that we all have behind the sternum, we have a well. And it doesn't show on the x-rays, but it's there. And it's a well filled with shit. And it's all the stuff that's ever happened to us, right? So when we're set out to write and we open that laptop and we start, it's like plunging a bucket into that well and bringing out some of that shit, you know? And you don't know what you're gonna get, and you know, kind of like the Forrest Gump chocolate. You know, all of a sudden you're writing about, you know, like my second novel was about killing someone by accident.
Oh yeah.
And it's like I couldn't live with myself.
Yeah.
I haven't killed anybody by accident or on purpose, but but the fear of it, you know, the fear of it is something that paralyzes me every time I drive or you know, or I'm in care of a little child, you know, and I'm worried that, you know, something might happen. And so that's a fear that I faced in my second novel. And that was my compass that took me all the way to the end, you know?
It's really helpful to identify that, and it's very motivating. Yeah. So now you know exactly what would happen if you killed someone too. Don't be afraid.
I'll be in jail.
Yeah. The end of the story is it doesn't end well. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, don't
not.
try it at home. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else would like to ask?
Yeah.
Yes.
The ending was great. Yeah, I wouldn't have wanted a Hollywood ending either. I like more of the variety, or we're thinking and wondering what happens next, not tying it up in a bow. But I guess, at least this is for both of you, do you have your own thoughts about what happened to the characters, like specifically Jean and Mary, like where they go? And not to reveal what that means, but does it like stick with you and you sort of play that out and know where people end up?
I think so. I don't really have like a sequel so much in my mind. I've actually more been thinking about a prequel with Jean, like how did Jean come about, because she's so strange. But no, again, I'm trying to phrase this without too many spoilers. I definitely think that someone like Jean will continue doing what she does. Yeah. Even if Jean went to prison, which she doesn't, she would carry on doing what she does. She'd find followers. She's just that kind of person. Yeah. I do feel like Mary is starting to be free. I think Anna will continue doing what she does.
Yeah.
She writes about her courtroom ordeal in the newspaper again. Like, I was very interested in this thing that people make the same mistakes. Very rarely do people have a pattern of behaviour, change it entirely and become a brand new type of person. And that's why I think the ending tried to be as real as possible, is that Gus still has an attraction to women that would be a kind of mother figure to her. So I kind of think they'd be more or less doing what they'd be doing, but I do, someone particularly like Jean, she'll never stop. Yeah. She believes in her own methods too much, I think. So yeah, they stay with me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Philippa, Maria, thank you so much for joining us and talking about In Her Defense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Such a special book.
Thank
Yes.
you so much
Thank
for
you
writing
so much,
it.
Maria.